Hey everyone, this video will cover Azure Functions authentication, and we're going to go through how you can set up authentication for your own functions. The diagram here shows a couple of different applications that are calling this app Azure Function, and the Azure Function is calling another Azure Function, as well as making a call to SQL. Now, these functions can be open or anonymous, or they can be locked down. But basically, the idea is that you wouldn't want to allow just anybody to be able to call your function. You want to have some control. There are basically two ways to do this. Actually, there are three. Up in the diagram over here, I'm showing that the Azure function can be configured with managed identity, but this is actually a special scenario of Azure integration. Not covered in this video, but I'll do another video on how to set up managed identity. But for this purposes, the purpose of this video, we're basically talking about two things: token authentication or Azure integration. In token authentication, there is a special token that you're going to manage, and you basically set up your calling application to use that token, and Azure Functions will only allow that call to succeed if the token is present. The token can either be provided in the URL as the code parameter, or it can be provided over the HTTP header. So let's take a look at the token authorization. How does that work? Each function itself can be set up to allow anonymous access, function level access, or admin level access. And what that means is that which token is the function going to look at. So in this example, I have four functions: hello world, get users, get products, and update user. They each have their own token, their own, and these are called function tokens. And at the function app level, there's actually two. There's a host token and an admin token. The idea is that if you set up your function to require admin authentication, you're going to need to use the admin token in order to use it. If it's set to function, then either the host or the function token can be used. So if, let's say, you set it up for get users, then get users function token or its parent, the host, will work. Similarly, if you set it up for products, it'll be the products function token or the host token. The bottom here, it shows the line protocol. The header is called X functions key, where you have to pass the token. And I said earlier, you would either send it in the URL or in this header. I like the header because sometimes that URL gets logged. And if it's getting logged, then that token is in the log file. And so that's not good. So I like the functions header because it's hidden from a lot of log scenarios. But let's see how this works. Now I'm going to show you a demo that actually, as I said, has these four functions defined. Hello world is set up as anonymous. Get users and get products are both set up as function. And update user is going to be set up as admin. But first, let's go take a look at how these keys, or where you can find the keys. All right. So I'm going to go over to my Azure function. So this is the resource group where my function code has been deployed. If I go into my function, I can see that there is sorry, here we go. Under the functions blade, there's an app keys section. If you go in here, you will see the keys defined for it. There's going to be two keys here, master and default. Master is actually the admin key, and default is the host key. And so what I've done is I've actually copied these as environment variables in my script, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. So we're going to come back to that. The function level keys are defined at the function. So if you go into the actual function get products, you look at its function keys, you can see it same way. You have to click on show values, but you can see it's defined. And similarly, each of the other functions has their own function key defined. Okay, so that's where you find the keys. And so in this demo, what I'm going to show is I'm going to call hello world, which is set up with anonymous, and I'm going to use it with no key, no authentication, or I'm going to use it with the get users key, the product key, the different function keys. And what we're going to see is that it's going to actually work. Because it's set up as anonymous, all of these are going to work. So actually, let's go give that a shot. So as I said earlier, what I've done is I've taken the keys, and I've actually copied them in as environment variables. So I have an app token, which is the host token, admin token, this is the master, product token, so this is from the product function, user token from the user get user function, update token is from the update update product or get update function itself, and they're basically copied in. And I've also copied in the URLs for each of the functions. So the way you get that is if you actually go into the function itself, there's this get URL, and you can copy that. If you notice in here, there's this code parameter, and this is they basically, just for convenience, they embed the token in there for you. And as I said earlier, I don't like to use that because it ends up in log files, and I don't want to see that. So I've got these environment variables defined, and basically I'm gonna call my functions to see that it works. Okay, so for this, let's try hello world with no authentication. And I'm going to use wget. So wget hello, and I want the output to just come to the screen, and I can see it here. So I'm getting a 200 response, and it says hello world, and these headers are output. So actually, let's go take a look at how I've done that. Here's my code that was deployed. Here's get products, get users, hello world, update user, hello world. And what I'm doing is basically taking a look at the request headers keys, and I've turned that into a string separated by new lines. And that's how you're seeing it. And the reason I'm doing that is because later in the second half of this demo, when we actually do AD integration, you'll see that the AD actually adds some additional headers, and we can inspect them to figure out whether that caller should have access or not. But so for now, I've got my hello world. Its function says it's anonymous. Update user, its function says it's set to admin. Get users function says it's a function level authentication. And get products function.json says that it's set as function as well. So I've already deployed this using Azure Tools. So I've gone here. If you need to find out about how to deploy this, you can go back to a different video in the channel. But for now, let's actually call it and see how this stuff works. So as I said earlier, I called hello world, and I got to see hello world. I got to see all the headers in it. Let's actually call it with some header values. So header, so x-functions-key. And we're actually going to call it with the admin token. Okay, that actually needs to be inside. That works as well. And now let's try the app token. That works. Let's try user. So all of them are working, and the reason is because it's set up for anonymous. So it doesn't really matter what. I could actually just pass some garbage in here, and it'll still work. And the reason for that is because it's set to anonymous. So all of these will work. Now let's actually show update user, which is set up as admin. And it's the only one that's going to work is admin. So just as a reminder, our update functions JSON is set to auth level admin. And so let's check that out. So my URL is update URL. And if I use the admin token here, this works, and it says update user. If I change that to, let's say, app token, I get a 401 unauthorized. If I use the function tokens like product, that fails. Let's try user. And it goes without saying that if all of these failed, anonymous should also fail. So now let's actually look at get users and get products. And we're going to use the app key, sorry, the host key or the admin key, right? All four should work. So, and the reason is because get products is set up as function, and similarly get users is also set up as function. So let's try product URL, and we're going to use the app token. That worked. It's get products, and I see the headers. And let's try the admin token. That also works. Let's change the URL from product to users. User with admin. That worked. And let's try app. So no surprise there. All four worked, and the reason they worked is because even though these are set up at function, they're responding to their own function token as well as the host token. Now let's take a look at the when we don't have any and the anonymous scenario where we're calling it without any tokens. So let's take this out, the header. That should fail. And let's look at product. And that fails as well. Okay, so and now we have this other scenario where we use the exact function key. That should work. And then if we use the function key for the other URL, the other function, it should fail. So, oops, all right, so let's go here, and we're going to use call product, and we're going to use product, and we're basically going to use the product key. This should work. That works. Now let's use the user token. It should fail. And it fails. And similarly, if we call user with the user token, this works. And if we call it with the product token, that fails. And the reason is because it doesn't match, right? So we've actually shown this. We've actually done this totality, right? We've called all the functions with all the possibilities, and we've seen that. Now this is great, except now you're going to have to manage those tokens. A lot of people do not like to do that. They don't want to have to maintain and manage all those tokens. And not to mention, like if the token gets out, anybody could call it. And so the only thing you could probably do at that point is refresh that token, and then those tokens become invalidated. It's not the end of the world, but it's actually not a great scenario. So now let's look at how AD is set up, right? In this scenario, you have a service principal, and you log in as a service principal. It's given access to call the function, and the function is similarly set up with authentication against AD. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the Azure function, and we're going to set it up to have authentication with AD, and then AD is going to know about it. Then we'll advertise an app role, and then we'll assign that app role to the service principal for the caller, and then we'll see how all that works. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually go to the browser. We're going to go to the function itself. So let's go to the Azure function here, and over here on the left under settings, you're going to see authentication. So we're going to go into authentication, and we're going to add an identity provider. There's a number of identity providers depending on how you want to authenticate yourself. So for this purpose of this demo, we're actually going to use Microsoft. I've set it up. It's going to create this app registration. So later on we're going to see this. It's the same as the name of the function, so that's actually very easy to identify. And if you're not able to have authorized, if you're not able to call it, we're setting it up so that we receive this 401 code. That's all I have to do. I click on add, and this will add an identity provider. Okay. Now at this point, my anonymous call should fail to work. Let's go check that out. So if I go in, and if we remember, look at our history, we can see that there was this call that we did to hello world. So actually, let's call this bang 2112. This pulls up, our command by that number. So this is doing wget hello and output, and you see that it's not authorized. This worked before. So if I go back and look at our history, oops, not history, but actually if we looked at the output prior, we would have seen this is all the history I've done in order to get this demo working. Okay, here we go. We will see at some point, I will get to that hello function. with an anonymous call. So here it was. We called it with nothing, with no tokens, and we actually had seen a response before. And at this point, all we've done is we've set up authentication, and now that authentication fails. Okay. And so in order to set this up further, what we're going to do is we're going to add an app role. So we click into the app registration for the function, and we're going to create an app role. Let's give it a name, function user. Okay, and this is going to be for application level. Just putting in some just default values here. Function, and I'm going to apply that. So now that role, that function app has an app role called function user. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to app registrations, and we're going to create a client. So this is a service principal we're going to create. So we're creating a new service principal. Just call it AD client, and single tenant, that's fine. I register this. After I've registered it, I'm going to assign it some API permissions. I'm going to grant it the permission to call my API, and I'm going to give it that function user, say add permission. And at this point, it's not granted, so I'm just going to grant permission for that, and see I see both of them. So function user should now be callable. And now what I've got to do is I'm going to log in as that user. Okay, so in order for me to log in as the user, I need to have this client secret first. So actually, let's add a secret. We're going to call this sample secret, and it's going to be valid for 6 months. We're going to copy its value. Okay, and we're going to set that up as an environment variable. So client secret equals that value. I'm going to use it again. Oops. Okay. Doesn't like blank spaces, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so I've defined that variable, and at this point, I'm going to log in as that service principal. In order for me to log in, I need this ID, the application ID. I'm going to say AZ login / service principal. The -u is actually my application ID, -p is the password is the client secret, and I'm going to need a tenant, and my tenant ID is here. Copy that, paste it. And the only thing, because this is service principal, I don't have subscriptions. I'm going to say allow no subscriptions. And if I did that correctly, I'm going to get that output that it's logged in. At this point, I should be able to make the call. So what the reason I'm doing this is because AZ has a very nice way to get the token from AD, and it packages it up as the bearer token in my call to the function. So it's basically there's a mechanism in AZ CLI that allows me to make REST API calls. If I look at help, I can see the parameters. So this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use method get. So let's try that out. So I'm going to say method is get, and the URL I'm going to use, I'm going to use the hello URL. This earlier failed, and the only other thing I need to provide is the resource. So there is a resource ID that I need to specify the resource so that Azure knows where to look up my behind the scenes. It has to know which directory to look things up. So I'm actually going to go to API permissions and click on this function. This API is actually this is the URL API / that I'm going to need it as a value for resource, and this allows AZ REST to look up the appropriate information. The only thing I need to do is I need to lock that back part off, and I hit enter. So what at this point I'm going to see is the function call succeeded, and I see the response, and I have a few more headers here. So if I look at it, I have XMS client principal, XMS principal IDP, request ID, client principal ID. I can inspect those to figure out some additional permissions at the function level that I might want. Now, I can probably use a combination of AD authentication as well as those tokens to have more control. But what this shows is how we are actually allowing this authenticated service principal to call the function, and the function is doing behind the scenes validation. All right, thank you.